Chapter 1. The Town That Time. Forgot Ethan Carter had been to forgotten towns before, places where industry dried up, where people packed their bags and never looked back. But Blackwood was different. It wasn't just abandoned, it felt wrong. The road leading into town was flanked by towering cypress trees. Their roots gnarled and twisted like skeletal fingers clawing through the cracked pavement. Spanish moss draped over the branches like the tattered remains of a funeral shroud. The Welcome to Blackwood sign was rusted and barely legible, its paint peeled away by years of neglect. Beneath it, someone had scrawled in black marker, "Turn back." Ethan exhaled sharply, gripping the wheel of his car. He had read about towns like this, places where secrets festered, where history refused to stay buried. A series of gruesome murders had put Blackwood on his radar. The official reports were vague, details scarce. The bodies were found mutilated, but there was never a suspect. No arrests, no explanations. The sheriff refused to comment. The locals barely spoke of it. That was why Ethan was here. As he drove through the town's center, he saw lifeless storefronts with broken windows, houses with sagging roofs and peeling paint. A few figures walked the sidewalks, moving with a strange, unnatural stillness. Their clothes were outdated, faded by time. No one met his gaze. No one acknowledged him. Ethan pulled his car up to Josiah's Hollow, the only bar that appeared to be open. A flickering red neon sign hummed above the entrance. As he stepped out, the smell of damp earth filled his nostrils. Somewhere in the distance, a single crow cawed before the silence swallowed its cry. Inside, the bar was dimly lit, the air thick with stale beer and something more pungent, decay. A dozen pairs of eyes turned toward him the moment he stepped through the door. Conversations died instantly, replaced by an unnatural hush. The bartender, an old man with cloudy gray eyes and a scar running down his left cheek, narrowed his gaze. "You lost, stranger." The man's voice was rough, like old leather rubbed raw. Ethan let the door swing shut behind him. Not lost, just passing through. He stepped up to the bar, pulling out a small notepad from his jacket. "I'm a journalist, here to write about the murders." A low murmur rippled through the room. A woman near the back made the sign of the cross. A younger man muttered something under his breath and turned away. The bartender wiped the counter with a rag that looked older than the bar itself. "Ain't nothing to write about," he said, voice low. "That's so." Ethan leaned forward slightly. "Because from what I've read, people are dying. The sheriff won't talk. The press barely covers it. And yet, this town stays quiet." He lowered his voice. "Why?" Josiah, the name was carved into a wooden plaque behind the bar, exhaled through his nose, a deep, tired breath. "Some things ain't meant to be disturbed." His cloudy eyes darkened. "You stay too long, and Blackwood will eat you alive." Ethan's fingers tightened around his notepad. What does that mean? The lights above them flickered. A cold chill crept through the room, raising the hairs on the back of Ethan's neck. The air felt heavier, suffocating. And then the whispers began. They were faint at first, just at the edge of hearing. A low, distorted murmur, like 100 voices speaking all at once, just beneath the threshold of understanding. Ethan stiffened, glancing around. No one else reacted. No one else seemed to hear them. The whispers grew louder, slithering into his ears like something alive. The air became icy cold. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. The warmth returned. The light above them flickered back to life. The whispers vanished. Ethan swallowed hard. What the hell was that? Josiah gripped the edge of the bar so tightly his knuckles turned white. You should leave, son. His voice was barely above a whisper. Ethan didn't move. His pulse thundered in his ears. He had come here looking for a story. Now he had one. And he wasn't leaving. Not yet. Chapter 2. The House on Hollow Street. Ethan Carter wasn't easily shaken, but the events at Josiah's Hollow left an unease sitting heavy in his gut. The whispers, the flickering lights, the fear etched into the faces of the bar's patrons. It was all too real to be a simple trick of the mind. But he pushed it aside. He was here to investigate, not to run from shadows. After leaving the bar, he drove through the town's empty streets, searching for a place to stay. The town had no hotels, no motels, just a single listing on an old real estate website. Victorian home, fully furnished, $20 per night, no questions asked. The address led him to Hollow Street, the only road in town where the houses still stood tall instead of slumping under their own weight. But they weren't welcoming. The houses were too dark, too still, like they were watching him as he drove past. And then he saw it. The house sat at the very end of the street, its once grand Victorian architecture now withered by time. The shutters hung crooked, the iron fence out front had rusted through, and the paint peeled away in long, curling strips. But despite its decay, it stood firm, almost as if it had defied time itself. Ethan parked in the cracked driveway. The landlord, a frail, sunken-eyed woman named Mrs. Wilkes, was already waiting for him on the porch. She looked like she hadn't slept in years. $20 a night, she said, voice brittle. She pressed the keys into his hand with fingers that trembled. Don't go into the basement. Ethan frowned. Why? Her sunken eyes flickered toward the house. Some doors ain't meant to be opened. She turned and walked away without another word. The inside of the house smelled of dust and mildew, but it was surprisingly intact. Dark wooden furniture filled the rooms, and heavy drapes choked out what little daylight remained. A grand staircase led to the upper floors, its wooden steps groaning beneath his weight as he explored. Upstairs, he found his room, small but enough. The bed was covered in an old quilt, the wallpaper faded and peeling. A massive wardrobe stood in the corner, its ornate carvings swirling into grotesque faces if he stared too long. Then there was the study. A heavy oak desk sat near the window, papers scattered across it as if someone had left in a hurry. But what caught Ethan's eye was the diary resting beside an old oil lamp. The leather cover was cracked, and the name Eleanor Blackwood was etched into it. He flipped through the pages. August 3rd, 1886. The voices return at night. They whisper beneath the floorboards. I dare not listen. I dare not answer. August 10th, 1886. Mother and father are gone. The house is empty, yet I hear them calling. The hollow man watches. He waits. Ethan's pulse quickened. He turned the page. August 17th, 1886. If you are reading this, it is too late. He sees you now. A sharp knock echoed through the house. Ethan jolted, heart hammering. He turned toward the door, but no one was there. The hallway was empty. Another knock from downstairs. Slowly, he stepped out of the study. The air had changed, colder now, almost suffocating. His breath fought him as he made his way down the staircase. The knock came again, from the basement door. Mrs. Wilkes's words whispered in his mind. Some doors ain't meant to be opened. Ethan swallowed hard. His journalist instincts told him to investigate. His gut told him to run. He reached for the doorknob, and then from the other side of the door, a child giggled. A cold, dead whisper followed. "Come play with us, Ethan." Ethan stumbled back, his breath caught in his throat. The doorknob twisted on its own, the wood creaking as the door inched open, just enough for the darkness beyond to breathe. Ethan didn't wait. He grabbed the diary and bolted upstairs, slamming his bedroom door shut. And yet, long after he crawled into bed, long after he forced his eyes shut, he could still hear it. A child's soft laughter and the sound of bare feet padding across the wooden floor outside his door. Chapter 3. The Hollow Man. Ethan didn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard it. The soft, rhythmic patter of bare feet just beyond his door. The whispered giggles of a child floating through the suffocating darkness of the old house. His fingers clenched around the diary of Eleanor Blackwood, his only connection to whatever horror lurked within these walls. By the time the first light of dawn crept through the heavy drapes, the footsteps had finally stopped. But the silence that followed was worse, as if something was waiting, watching. Ethan exhaled shakily and swung his legs over the side of the bed. His limbs ached from exhaustion, his skin clammy with cold sweat. But he was here for answers. And he knew exactly where to start. The basement. The old staircase creaked beneath his weight as he descended, the wooden steps bowing as if they might snap at any moment. The air grew thick with damp rot, the stench of mildew, and something more acrid, something that smelled like old blood clinging to the walls. At the bottom of the stairs, a single wooden door stood before him, its surface warped with age. Long scratch marks marred the wood, deep grooves as if something had tried desperately to claw its way out. Ethan reached for the doorknob. It was ice cold. He turned it. The door groaned open, revealing nothing but darkness. The air that spilled out was thick, suffocating, and carried a deep, earthy scent like a grave long forgotten. Ethan raised his flashlight, its feeble beam cutting through the void. And that's when he saw them. Handprints. Dozens of small, childlike handprints smeared across the brick walls, pressed deep into the grime as if tiny fingers had reached out from the shadows. Ethan's breath hitched. His instincts screamed at him to turn back, to run. But before he could, something shifted at the edge of the light. A figure, tall, emaciated, twisted. Its body was impossibly thin, its limbs elongated and wrong. Pale, mottled skin stretched tight over protruding bones. Its fingers were long, tipped with splintered, jagged nails. But it was the face that made Ethan's stomach lurch. There was nothing there, just a smooth, featureless expanse of pale flesh where its eyes, nose, and mouth should have been. And yet, Ethan knew it was looking at him. The Hollow Man. The air turned frigid. The thing took a shuddering breath, its hollow chest expanding unnaturally. A whisper slithered through the room. "You shouldn't have come." Ethan's muscles locked. His body screamed at him to move, to run, to do anything, but he couldn't. The Hollow Man lunged. Ethan staggered back, barely dodging its outstretched claws as he scrambled up the basement stairs. The thing moved like a broken puppet, its limbs jerking unnaturally, bones cracking with every step. He slammed the door shut, throwing his weight against it just as something struck the wood from the other side. The impact rattled the entire house. Silence. Then, a child's voice, whispering through the door. "He's coming for you, Ethan." Ethan ran. Back in his room, he locked the door, his chest rising and falling in ragged gasps. His hands trembled as he flipped through Eleanor Blackwood's diary, desperate for answers. And then he found it. September 2nd, 1886. I saw him tonight, the Hollow Man. He watches from the dark, his face empty, his body wrong. He whispers things I do not understand, but I know this. He is hungry. September 7th, 1886. The children went missing. One by one, they vanished. Some say they ran away. But I know the truth. The Hollow Man took them. He feeds on those who listen to his whispers. September 12th, 1886. I hear him outside my door. I am next. Ethan's blood ran cold. Outside, the floorboards creaked. Slow, deliberate. A whisper slid through the cracks of his door. "Let me in, Ethan." He covered his ears, but the voice was inside his head now. The Hollow Man had found him, and this time it wouldn't let him go. Chapter 4. The Whispering Fear. Ethan pressed his back against the door, his breath shallow, heart hammering against his ribs. The whisper had slithered through the wood like smoke, seeping into his mind, wrapping around his thoughts like cold fingers. "Let me in, Ethan." The voice was wrong, not quite human. It shifted in pitch, echoing in a way that made his teeth ache. Ethan squeezed his eyes shut. This was not real. This was a hallucination, a trick of exhaustion. That's what he told himself. But then, the whisper changed. It became his mother's voice. "Ethan, please, open the door, sweetheart. It's me." His eyes snapped open. No, his mother had been dead for 15 years. The doorknob rattled violently, as if something on the other side was testing it, pressing against it, waiting. Scraping sounds, long, slow drags of nails against wood, filled the silence. And then the knocking began. Not urgent, not desperate, just a slow, rhythmic tap, tap, tap. Ethan's body locked up. He didn't breathe. The knocking grew louder, more forceful. Bang! The entire door shook in its frame. Bang, bang, bang. Something huge was on the other side, something unnatural. Ethan grabbed the diary of Eleanor Blackwood with trembling fingers and forced himself to move. He backed away from the door, his body screaming at him to run. But run where? His gaze flickered to the window. The thick curtains billowed slightly, though there was no wind. The whisper came again, softer now, from inside the room. "You can't hide from me, Ethan." The temperature plummeted. The shadows in the corners of the room twisted unnaturally, stretching toward him like reaching hands. His breath came in short, panicked gasps, and then he saw it. The mirror. The tall, antique mirror standing across from the bed. The glass had fogged over, but something moved beneath the surface. A shape, too tall, too thin, too hollow. Ethan's reflection did not move. He whipped around, his pulse screaming in his ears. Nothing was there. But in the mirror, the Hollow Man tilted its head, its faceless void fixed on him. The diary slipped from Ethan's fingers. The mirror shattered. A deafening scream erupted from the glass. Not human, not animal, something else entirely. Shards exploded outward, slicing through the air. Ethan ducked, shielding his face as pieces rained down around him. When he dared to look up, the mirror was empty, but the whisper remained. "You are mine now." dawn comes too late. Ethan didn't sleep, couldn't sleep. The Hollow Man was in the house, watching, waiting. Somewhere deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning. At first light, he left his room, diary clutched in his hand. The house felt different now. The walls listened, the air thick with unseen eyes. He had to find out what happened to Eleanor Blackwood, because if he didn't, he would be next. Chapter 5. The Blackwood Curse. The morning light did little to chase away the dread coiling in Ethan's gut. He stood in the dimly lit hallway, staring at the remnants of the shattered mirror. Splinters of glass glistened like tiny teeth in the cold light. But what disturbed him more was the fact that the Hollow Man was gone. Not a trace of the monstrous figure remained. No sign it had ever been in the reflection. But Ethan knew better. It was still here, somewhere, watching, waiting. With the diary of Eleanor Blackwood clutched tightly in his hand, Ethan forced himself to move. He needed answers. He needed to know why this thing had fixated on him, and more importantly, how to stop it. A town that doesn't forget. The town's public records office was as old and crumbling as the rest of Josiah's Hollow. Dust hung in the air, and the smell of mildew clung to the yellowed pages of ancient documents. The clerk behind the desk was a gaunt man in his 60s, skin pale as wax, as if he hadn't stepped into sunlight in decades. His name tag read Mr. Lorne. Ethan approached the desk, clearing his throat. "I'm looking for information on the Blackwood family. Specifically, Eleanor Blackwood." Mr. Lorne's expression didn't change, but a shadow passed through his sunken eyes. Blackwood. His voice was dry, brittle. "That name ain't spoken much around here." Ethan placed the diary on the counter, flipping it open to one of the last entries. "I think she knew something in that house. Something that's still there." Mr. Lorne didn't blink, didn't breathe. For a long moment, he simply stared at the diary. Then he sighed. "You ain't the first to come asking." His fingers trembled slightly as he reached for an old ledger on the shelf behind him. "Every couple years, some outsider comes poking around, looking for the Blackwoods, looking for the truth." Ethan leaned forward. "And what happened to them?" Mr. Lorne's jaw tightened. He set the heavy ledger down and flipped through the pages, his fingers lingering on a brittle, yellowed newspaper clipping. "Blackwood family vanishes, September 14th, 1886. Ethan's stomach twisted. The article was short, hastily written. The details were scarce. The Blackwood family had lived in the house at the end of Hollow Street for generations. Then, one night, they were gone. No bodies, no signs of struggle, just missing. All except for one. Eleanor Blackwood. She was found wandering the woods 2 days later, covered in mud and blood that didn't belong to her. When the townsfolk questioned her, she only said 3 words. "He took them." Ethan exhaled sharply. The Hollow Man. "What happened to Eleanor?" Ethan asked, his voice low. Mr. Lorne hesitated, then turned the page. Another clipping. "Eleanor Blackwood found dead, 1892. The article was even shorter than the first. She had been locked away in the old Josiah asylum, raving about whispers in the dark. She refused to sleep, muttering about a man with no face. Then, one night, the nurses found her in her room, hanging from the rafters by her own bedsheets. But it was the final sentence that made Ethan's blood run cold. Before her death, she carved a warning into the walls of her cell. "He is in the house. He will never leave." Ethan's grip on the diary tightened. finished story. Ethan didn't return to the house immediately. He couldn't, not yet. Instead, he spent hours combing through more records, old maps, forgotten reports, and slowly, a pattern began to emerge. The disappearances. It wasn't just the Blackwoods. Every few years, someone went missing near Hollow Street. A drifter, a traveler, a lost child. Always the same circumstances. No struggle, no remains. Just gone. But one detail stood out. The basement. Every record mentioned something beneath the house. A foundation older than the house itself. Something buried deep in the earth. Ethan felt a chill creep down his spine. The Hollow Man wasn't just haunting the house. The house was built to keep him in. And last night, when the basement door had started to open on its own, something had changed. Back to Hollow Street. By the time Ethan pulled into the driveway, the sun was already sinking, casting long, claw-like shadows across the dying grass. The house loomed before him, dark and silent. But he knew better now. It wasn't empty, not anymore. Steeling himself, he stepped inside. The moment the door closed behind him, the whispering began. Low, unintelligible, moving through the walls like a cold breath. Ethan ignored it. He had work to do. He pulled a bag from his car, a crowbar, a flashlight, a handful of salt from the local shop, and a worn-out Bible he hadn't touched in years. And then, gripping the crowbar tightly, he turned toward the basement door. If he wanted to survive, if he wanted to end this, he had to go back down, back into the dark, where the Hollow Man was waiting. Chapter 6. Beneath the house. The basement door loomed before Ethan, its warped wood slick with cold sweat from the damp air seeping through the cracks. The scratches he had seen before, deep, desperate grooves carved into the surface, now looked more like something had tried to escape rather than break in. His grip on the crowbar tightened. The whispering had grown louder, not just one voice, many, layered over each other, some pleading, some laughing, some barely above a breath. But one voice cut through them all. A child's voice. "He's waiting for you, Ethan." His stomach twisted. He turned the rusted doorknob. The door swung open with a sickening creak, revealing a staircase plunging into darkness. A wave of damp, grave-cold air rolled up from below, carrying with it the unmistakable scent of earth and decay. Ethan hesitated for only a second. Then, with the diary of Eleanor Blackwood tucked under his arm, the crowbar in one hand and the flashlight in the other, he stepped into the abyss. The descent. The stairs creaked and groaned beneath his weight, each step feeling like it might give way. The deeper he went, the colder it became. His breath misted in the air. At the bottom, he found himself in a narrow, stone-walled cellar. The space was wrong, too deep, too ancient, as if the house had been built atop something much older. His flashlight flickered, barely pushing back the thick shadows pressing in around him. Then he saw them, the handprints, not just on the walls this time. They covered the floor, the ceiling, the wooden support beams, some small, like a child's, others too large, too distorted to be human. Ethan's breath came fast and shallow. Then something moved at the edge of the light, a shift in the darkness, a figure, the Hollow Man. Ethan's flashlight flickered violently, the bulb whining as if it were being smothered. The air thickened, pressing against him like unseen hands. Then the whispers stopped. For the first time since he had entered the house, there was silence. Total, absolute, wet scraping sound, like something dragging itself across the stone. Ethan's flashlight cut out completely. The forgotten door panic surged through him, but before he could move, the ground beneath him shifted. The air swelled with something ancient, something that had been waiting for far too long. His fingers fumbled for his lighter, and as the small flame sputtered to life, he saw it. A door. Not just any door. This one was carved from blackened wood, covered in symbols he didn't recognize. Unlike the warped basement door upstairs, this one was pristine, untouched by time. And worst of all, it was slightly open. A thin sliver of endless darkness lay beyond it. The realization hit him like a thunderclap. This wasn't just a basement, it was a prison, and something had gotten out. He sees you. A chill ran down Ethan's spine, his every instinct screaming at him to run. But before he could move, a voice whispered right against his ear. Too late. A hand clamped onto his wrist. The fingers were thin, brittle, and inhumanly long. They wrapped around his skin like roots, tightening, digging in. He turned and saw the hollow man's face. Or rather, where a face should have been. Nothing but smooth, stretched skin, and possibly pale, as if all the blood had been drained long ago. Its head twitched at an unnatural angle, as if trying to see him despite having no eyes. The whispering returned, now inside his skull, behind his eyes. Did you think you could leave? Pain erupted in Ethan's head, sharp and blinding, as if 1,000 voices were screaming at once. His vision blurred. His legs buckled. The hollow man's grip tightened. And then, the diary slipped from Ethan's grasp, its brittle pages fluttering open as it hit the stone floor. One entry stared back at him, written in shaky, desperate handwriting. The door must never open. He feeds when we listen. He takes when we see him. If you hear the whispering, do not answer. Ethan's pulse pounded in his ears. He had already answered. The hollow man let out a low, rattling breath, and then the door creaked open wider. Ethan's scream never left his throat as the darkness swallowed him whole. Chapter 7. The Hollow Place. Ethan's scream died in his throat as he was dragged into the darkness. It was not the kind of darkness found in the dead of night or an unlit room. This was deeper, heavier, a suffocating, endless void that wrapped around him like a shroud. His body felt weightless, yet crushingly heavy at the same time. He tried to move, to fight, but his limbs barely responded, as if the air itself was pressing against him, holding him in place. The whispers were everywhere now, not from outside, from within. They slithered through his mind, soft and insidious, spilling secrets he had long buried, exposing every fear, every regret. You should have never come back. You belong to him now. No one will remember you. A sudden jolt sent him tumbling forward, his stomach twisting as gravity seemed to shift. He hit the ground hard, the impact jarring his bones. But the ground wasn't solid. It breathed beneath him. Ethan choked back a gasp and scrambled to his feet. His hands pressed against the surface, slick, damp, and pulsing faintly beneath his touch. The realization clawed at his mind. This wasn't earth. This wasn't stone. It was flesh. He staggered backward, his breath ragged. His flashlight was gone. His crowbar was gone. But ahead of him, far in the distance, was a faint, flickering glow. The only light in this place. And he was no longer alone. The watchers in the dark shapes began to emerge from the blackness. Dozens, hundreds, figures thin and twisted, standing motionless in the distance. Their outlines wavered as if they weren't entirely real, half-formed shadows clinging to the edges of existence. But Ethan knew they were watching, waiting. The flickering light ahead pulsed, illuminating something towering behind them. A structure, an altar, and at its center, a figure seated on a throne of writhing limbs and hollowed-out skulls. The Hollow Man. Ethan's breath hitched. This was where it fed, where it brought the ones it took. He took a step back. The ground beneath him shifted, sending a sickening ripple through the fleshy terrain. The Watchers moved in unison, not forward, not backward. They twitched like puppets dangling from strings, their limbs jerking, twisting at unnatural angles. Their heads lolled, some too heavy, some too light, some barely attached. One of them whispered, "You see him now." Another voice, closer, "And now he sees you." Ethan's veins turned to ice. The Hollow Man rose from his throne. The Hollow Man comes. The throne collapsed into itself, the writhing limbs and skulls sinking into the darkness as the Hollow Man stepped forward. Its faceless head tilted unnaturally, as if observing him from multiple angles at once. The whispers ceased, and for the first time, Ethan heard it speak, not in a whisper, not in a scream, but in his own voice. "You have already answered, Ethan." His knees buckled. The Hollow Man wasn't just inside his mind now. It was inside his body. The ground beneath him began to sink, pulling him downward as if the flesh itself was swallowing him. He thrashed, clawed at the pulsing surface, but it would not let go. The Hollow Man extended one long, bony finger, pointing at Ethan's chest. "Your story is unfinished." Ethan's vision blurred. His thoughts became fragmented, distant, like echoes in a collapsing void. The last thing he saw before the darkness took him completely was himself, standing among the Watchers. Chapter 8. The reflection. That wasn't Ethan's mind fractured as he saw himself standing among the Watchers. Not a mere illusion, not a trick of the shadows. It was him, same face, same eyes, but empty. The reflection moved when he didn't, blinked when he stared, twitched when he stood still. Ethan tried to take a step back, but the fleshy ground tightened around his ankles like a mouth preparing to swallow him whole. A deep, hollow breath filled the space behind him. The Hollow Man was closer. "You do not belong to yourself anymore." The voice, his own voice, came from his reflection. "You belong to us." Ethan's heartbeat thundered in his chest. His limbs felt foreign, as if they weren't his to control anymore. Then the reflection smiled, not a human smile, a stretched, impossible grin that cracked the skin at the corners of its mouth. The Watchers twitched in unison, their hollow faces turning toward him. And Ethan ran. The tunnels beneath the skin. He stumbled blindly into the dark, the ground shifting beneath him. Every step sank into something wet and pulsing, but he didn't stop. The whispers chased after him, murmuring from every direction. "He let you in. He won't let you leave. Your place is here now." Ahead, something shifted. A shape, no, a tunnel, opened in the darkness, carved from the same unnatural flesh, lined with rib-like structures that pulsed like a living throat, a way out or a deeper trap. But there was no choice. He lunged inside. Bird memories. The tunnel twisted and turned, narrowing as if trying to suffocate him. Ethan pressed forward, ignoring the bile rising in his throat. ignoring the sensation that the tunnel was breathing around him. And then, a voice, not a whisper, a memory. Ethan. He froze. That voice. It was her, Eleanor Blackwood. His hands trembled as he reached for the diary still tucked in his jacket. The moment his fingers touched the brittle pages, the tunnel convulsed violently, as if rejecting something foreign. The walls shuddered. The watchers screamed from somewhere behind him, and suddenly, the ground beneath him gave way. He plunged into nothingness. The Blackwood truth Ethan landed hard, his body slamming against something solid. Not flesh, not bone, stone. The world spun as he struggled to his feet. His head throbbed. His breath came in ragged gasps. And then he saw it. A room. Unlike the hollow place, this chamber felt real. Cold stone walls, rusted chains embedded in the ground, a single wooden chair toppled on its side. And against the farthest wall, a mirror, not cracked, not warped, just a simple dust-covered mirror. Ethan took a step closer. His reflection looked back, but something was wrong. The longer he stared, the more he saw it. Not just his face, another face layered over his. A woman's face, Eleanor Blackwood. Her mouth moved, but the voice wasn't her own. It was his. You were never supposed to find this place. The walls shook violently. The mirror rippled as if something behind it was trying to push through. The taller man's whisper returned, curling around his mind like smoke. You are the last piece. Ethan's blood ran cold. Then the mirror shattered and something stepped through. Chapter 9. The thing in the mirror. The shards of the mirror hung in the air for a split second before they came crashing down, scattering across the cold stone floor like fallen stars. Ethan stumbled back, his heart pounding like war drums in his chest. Something had stepped through. Not a reflection, not a shadow, something else. It stood just beyond the broken frame, tall, thin, draped in a mass of writhing black fabric that shifted like it was alive. Its face, or what should have been its face, was an abyss, a swirling black void that devoured light, devoured everything. And then it moved. A single skeletal hand reached out, fingers too long, too sharp, too wrong. The air in the room turned thick and rotten, the scent of decay pouring from the gaping wound in reality where the mirror once stood. And then it spoke, not in whispers, not in screams, but in Ethan's own voice. You already know what you are, a truth too terrible. Ethan shook his head violently. No, he croaked, his voice barely a whisper. I don't know anything. The thing in the mirror tilted its head, the motion unnatural, like a puppet on rusted strings. Then let me show you. The world lurched, a violent pull, as if reality itself had been ripped open beneath him. The stone room melted away, dissolving into black smoke. And suddenly, he was somewhere else, somewhere familiar. The forgotten night. He stood in a forest, its trees twisted and skeletal, their branches clawing at the sky like gnarled fingers. The air was heavy with mist. The moon hung too low, its pale light sickly and wrong. Ethan's breath came in sharp gasps. He knew this place. He had been here before. And then he saw them, 3 figures, standing in a circle. Their faces were blurred, shifting like smoke, but their hands dripped with something dark, blood, and at the center of the circle, a 4th figure. crashing down like a tidal wave. He knew this night. He knew that child. And he knew what happened next. The thing in the mirror whispered in his ear. "Say it." Ethan choked on the words, his hands trembling. But the truth had already been spoken. He was not just a victim of the Hollow Man. He had helped create it. A debt that must be paid. The memory ripped away, and Ethan was back in the stone chamber. The mirror was gone. The thing in the mirror was not. It loomed over him, its featureless face impossibly close. The Hollow Man was born that night. A sacrifice, a curse, and now, Ethan, you are the final piece. The room shuddered violently, cracks splintering across the stone walls. The air tore open, revealing the endless abyss of the hollow place beyond. Ethan's body felt like it was unraveling, as if his very existence was being peeled away like layers of rotting skin. The thing in the mirror smiled. "You were always meant to take my place." And then the Hollow Man reached for him, the final bargain. Ethan staggered backward, pressing himself against the cold stone wall. "No," he whispered. "I won't let this happen." The Hollow Man tilted its head, as if amused. "You still believe you have a choice." The darkness shifted, and suddenly Ethan felt something pulling at his mind, at his very soul. Memories, his memories, peeled away like layers of old paint, revealing something underneath. Something older, something that wasn't his. The curse of hollow wood. A vision flashed before his eyes, not from his life, but from someone else's. A town long buried beneath history. A name carved into a rotting wooden sign, Hollowood. And a man, his face eerily similar to Ethan's, but older, more sunken, stood at the center of it all. The original Hollow Man. The first to strike the bargain. The first to be consumed. And now, centuries later, the cycle was repeating. Ethan wasn't just chosen at random. He was always meant to be here. "Your family's sins created me," the Hollow Man rasped, stepping closer. "And now you will finish what they started." Ethan screamed as the shadows engulfed him. The last thing he saw was his own reflection, watching, smiling, whispering. It was always going to end this way. Chapter 10. The Hollow Man's embraced darkness. Cold, suffocating, absolute. Ethan floated in the void, weightless, formless. There was no ground beneath his feet, no air in his lungs, only emptiness. And then, a whisper. "It's time, Ethan." The voice was inside him, around him, part of him. He tried to move, but there was nothing to move. He tried to breathe, but there was no breath left to take. He was disappearing. No, not disappearing. Being unraveled. Every memory, every thought, every part of him peeled away, sinking into the darkness like dying embers. And then, the Hollow Man spoke again. "Do you remember the taste of fear?" Suddenly, Ethan wasn't floating anymore. He was falling. The descent into hollow wood. The darkness twisted and stretched, forming vague shapes. Distorted buildings, skeletal trees, streets that led to nowhere. And then, with a sickening lurch, Ethan slammed into the ground. He gasped, lungs burning, body aching. He was somewhere real again, or at least something close to real. He pushed himself up, his hands sinking into the cold, wet dirt. A thick fog rolled across the landscape, swallowing the world in a heavy gray haze. And then he saw it. A town, broken and crumbling, trapped between time and death. Hollow wood. It was still here. Ethan's stomach twisted. This place shouldn't exist. It had been erased, wiped from history long ago. And yet, here it was, like a wound that refused to heal. hollow man's whisper curled around his mind. This is where it began, and this is where it must end. The Forgotten Ones. The town was silent, but Ethan could feel it watching him. Empty houses lined the cracked streets, their windows gaping like hollow eyes. Shadows moved within them, flickering just out of sight. Not ghosts, not people. Something else. Something hungry. A shape shifted in the fog ahead. Then another, and another. Figures emerged from the mist, their movements unnatural, like broken puppets jerking forward on invisible strings. Their faces were blurred, flickering in and out of focus. But Ethan knew who they were, the Forgotten Ones, the victims of Hollowwood, men, women, children, all swallowed by the curse, all trapped here, all waiting for him. The Hollow Man's offer, a figure stepped forward, separate from the rest, tall, thin, wrapped in shifting black fabric. The Hollow Man. You were always meant to return, Ethan. The shadows around him pulsed as if the very air was alive. You have seen the truth. You understand the cost. The Hollow Man raised a skeletal hand, his fingers stretching toward Ethan's chest. Take your place. Ethan's body convulsed violently. Images flashed through his mind. The ritual, the blood, the screams, the child they had sacrificed. The truth was clear now. The Hollow Man wasn't a demon. It was a curse, a role, a punishment that must be passed on. And now it was Ethan's turn. His breath shuddered. His limbs felt heavy. He could feel himself slipping, unraveling, becoming part of it. You don't have to fight anymore, the Hollow Man whispered. Just let go. Ethan almost did, until he heard her voice. Ethan. It cut through the darkness like a blade. Eleanor Blackwood. A name, a voice, a way out. Ethan gasped, and then he ran. Chapter 11. The Last Escape. Ethan ran. The fog clawed at his skin, thick as wet cement, slowing him down with every step. Behind him, the Hollow Man's voice echoed through the endless streets of Hollowwood. You cannot run from me. You belong to me. The shadows shifted violently, surging toward him, warping the landscape. Buildings twisted and melted. Roads bent into impossible angles. Hollowwood itself was alive, reshaping to trap him. Ethan didn't stop. He had seen the truth. He knew what this place was. This wasn't just an abandoned town. It was a prison, a living curse. And if he didn't get out now, he never would. A light in the dark ahead. A single flickering lantern burned in the fog. Ethan's chest tightened. Eleanor Blackwood. She was waiting for him. The woman from his visions, from the whispers in the dark. The only one who had ever escaped. Or at least, that's what he thought. Because as he ran toward the light, the ground split open beneath him. Ethan screamed as he fell into the abyss. The hollow place. He hit something solid, but it wasn't the ground. It was a mirror, not glass, not reflection, something worse. Ethan's own face stared back at him, but it wasn't right. The eyes were hollow, the mouth curved into a cruel smile. Do you finally see? The reflection whispered. You were always meant to take my place. The mirror shattered, and suddenly, Ethan wasn't Ethan anymore. The truth of the curse memories rushed in, but they weren't his. The first Hollow Man, the rituals, the endless cycle of suffering, sacrifice, and rebirth. Every victim who had ever been claimed by the hollow place. And worst of all, the moment he had helped summon it. The ritual in the woods, the child they had killed, his hands soaked in blood, Ethan choked, nausea rising in his throat. "No," he whispered. "I didn't. I wouldn't." But he had. And now it was his turn to suffer. The Hollow Man stepped toward him, shadows curling around his body like ink in water. "There is only one way to end this. Take the mask." A cold, blackened hand rose, revealing a twisted, bone-white mask. The mask of the Hollow Man. Ethan's breath hitched. He knew what would happen if he put it on. He would become the next guardian of this curse, trapped, forgotten, until the next sacrifice was made. But then, a voice. "Ethan, listen to me. Eleanor, she was here. The final stand." Ethan's vision snapped back. The Hollow Man loomed over him, mask in hand. The shadowy figures of the Forgotten Ones circled around, their hollow faces expectant, waiting, wanting. But Eleanor stood beyond them, untouched, a lantern in her hand. She wasn't a ghost. She was real, and she knew the way out. "You don't have to take his place," she yelled. "You can break the cycle," the Hollow Man hissed, shadows rippling violently. "Lies." Eleanor's eyes burned into Ethan's. "The curse needs a willing host, Ethan. If you refuse, it dies." Ethan's heart slammed against his ribs. It needed him to submit, to accept his fate. If he rejected it, it would have no power. The Hollow Man's fingers tightened around the mask. "You will not defy me." The darkness surged forward, tendrils lashing out, grasping Ethan's limbs, trying to drag him down. Ethan clenched his fists. For the first time, he fought back the breaking of the Hollow Man. The shadows wrapped around his throat, squeezing. The Hollow Man forced the mask toward his face, but Ethan threw his hands up, grabbing it before it could touch his skin. No. The Hollow Man froze. A tremor ran through the darkness. The Forgotten Ones staggered back, confused, uncertain. The Hollow Man tried to force the mask down again, but Ethan held firm. "I will not take your place." The world shuddered violently. A horrible, inhuman screech ripped through the void. The Hollow Man reeled back, as if struck. Cracks split across its body, shadows leaking from within. Ethan felt the curse weakening. It was working. He turned to Eleanor. "How do we finish this?" She lifted the lantern high. "Burn it." Ethan's hands tightened around the mask. The Hollow Man screamed, lunging toward him. But it was too late. Ethan threw the mask into the flame, the collapse of hollow wood. The mask burst into fire. The Hollow Man's screech became an ear-piercing wail of agony. Shadows poured from its body, writhing, burning, collapsing inward. The Forgotten Ones collapsed, their forms crumbling into dust. The town itself began to disintegrate. Buildings caved in, streets cracked apart. The sky tore open like fragile paper. Hollow wood was dying. Ethan felt the ground vanish beneath him. Everything was falling apart. And then, a hand grabbed his wrist. "Eleanor." "Hold on," she yelled. The fire consumed everything, swallowing the Hollow Man whole. The last thing Ethan saw was its face, the void where its eyes should be, the silent, gaping mouth. And then, the world snapped to black. Chapter 12. The final dawn silence. Ethan's body felt weightless, drifting through the darkness. Was he dead? No, there was still breath in his lungs, still a pulse in his veins. Then, a voice. "Ethan." His eyes snapped open. The world was spinning, a chaotic blur of gray and gold. Then, suddenly, impact. Awakening in the ruins. Ethan gasped, coughing violently as he hit solid ground. His entire body ached as if he had been torn apart and stitched back together. He blinked, vision slowly clearing. buildings of hollow wood were nothing but shattered ruins, fading into the early morning light. The town was collapsing, dissolving into dust, as if it had never existed at all. And then standing beside him, Eleanor. She was breathing hard, her face streaked with ash, her lantern dim, but still burning. "You made it," she whispered. Ethan's chest tightened. "Did we?" He swallowed. "Did we really destroy it?" Eleanor turned toward the ruins. The last remnants of the Hollow Man's shadow curled like dying embers in the air. Then, nothing. A wave of silence rushed over them. No whispers, no voices calling from the dark, no presence watching them. It was over. The curse is broken. Ethan sat on the cracked pavement, his mind reeling. The weight of centuries of suffering gone. The Hollow Man, the curse, the town itself, all erased. "We stopped it," he muttered, almost not believing it himself. Eleanor nodded, but her expression was haunted. "For now," Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" She looked at him, her eyes dark and knowing. "Curses like this don't just disappear, Ethan. They always leave something behind." A chill crawled down his spine. Had they truly destroyed it, or had they just buried it deeper? Eleanor sighed and stood up, dusting herself off. "Come on," she said. "We need to leave before this place takes us with it." Ethan nodded, his muscles screaming in protest as he forced himself upright. Together, they walked away from the ruins, and hollow wood crumbled behind them. The road back, the journey back through the woods felt different. The air was lighter. The trees no longer whispered. For the first time in what felt like forever, Ethan didn't feel like he was being watched, but something still didn't feel right. Eleanor noticed his hesitation. "What is it?" Ethan hesitated, then shook his head. "I don't know. It just feels too easy." Eleanor gave him a small, tired smile. Maybe not every horror story ends in tragedy. Ethan wasn't sure if he believed that, but he wanted to. He needed to. As the forest thinned and the sky brightened with the rising sun, Ethan took a deep breath. For the first time in a long time, he felt free, but some things never die. Hours later, Ethan sat in his apartment, staring at the sunrise from his window. His hands still shook, his body ached, but he was alive. It was over, right? A gust of wind rattled the glass. Ethan shivered. The apartment suddenly felt colder. He turned, glancing at the dark corner of the room. And then, a whisper, faint, distant, but undeniably real. "Ethan." His blood ran ice cold. The lantern Eleanor had given him, still burning softly on the table, flickered violently. Then, the shadows shifted. A slow, terrible smile curled across his lips. But Ethan wasn't smiling, and in the reflection of the window, his eyes were completely hollow.